Hello there, and welcome to the Wealth Table, where mindfulness and action lead you to being wealthy. My name is Kimberly Y. Evans, and I am one of the co-founders and co-host of the Wealth Table.
And hello, my name's Kathryn Erickson, the other co-founder and co-host. So, Kimberly, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about one of your favorite topics or one of your favorite areas of conversation, which is something that has to do with emotions and how we handle things. And so you and I are having this amazing conversation about shame and how it works with money and all of those kind of things. So kind of why don't you tell our listeners about what we were talking about, kind of how we got to there. And let's just have this conversation out loud about shame and money.
All right. So, I don't know if you have ever felt shame about a money decision. I know I have. And when I felt that shame, it was because I felt that I wasn't worthy. I wasn't good at money. Somehow I had missed the class on money. And so I started doing a little bit of research, and Brene Brown, I'm sure you guys have heard of her, is a social scientist who has actually researched various emotions, and shame and vulnerability are her two most noticed areas. And the way Brene Brown, defines shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So when you add that definition to your relationship with money, and if you believe that you are unworthy of love and belonging with money, can you see how your actions are going to make that come true? If that is a core emotion and belief that you hold, what you do with your availability of money is going to look a lot different than if you recognize that shame may be driving some of your financial decisions. You sit with shame and then come to the realization that you can do better. So that's why I think shame, it's so important to identify it, become aware of it if it is in your landscape. It may not be, but I can almost guarantee if you had trouble with money, if you have trouble either with overspending or not managing your money well, let me put it that way. You have impulse purchases, or you can justify buying this thing that you just know you need, know you want, but you don't really need. Those kinds of things. If you can't be objective about how you handle money, I guarantee you shame is part of that formula, part of your psychological and emotional process. So that's why it's so important to talk about it. Now, Kimberly, I know you have had clients that at the beginning they may say, oh, I'm just not good with money, but as you explore and as you ask more questions, you kind of get to that underlying layer, and that's where shame lies. It's always underneath the surface. It's not going to be readily apparent, and that's where it thrives. So the second half of this conversation is, how do you handle shame? How do you move forward and manage it?
So, Catherine, let me ask you this question. So, thinking about shame and really kind of how you handle money, maybe it's impulse spending or something, could that shame also control what you're not doing with your money or
Oh,
what you
absolutely.
believe about your money? So, for example, right, people believe I was born poor, I'm going to be poor, this is just what we do, and I'm going to stay poor for the rest of my life and then die.
No. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That is that's an ingrained belief that they probably picked up from their parents or caregivers, but they don't have to continue it. You see, each person, everyone has the opportunity to change their inner world, to change these patterns, to change these emotional reactions. And that's my point. You have to become aware of it first and want to change. So, to your point, shame can also stop you from learning more about money, learning more about investing, deciding that you do want to invest consistently a certain percentage of your income. Shame is, it's not good for anyone.
Mhm.
And that's why
Well,
I
and
wanted
it
to
sounds
talk
like what
about
we're
it.
yeah, and it sounds like what we're saying really is shame is really kind of somebody's valuing themselves based
They're
on a shame,
they're
based on the feeling of
devaluing.
being shameful or
Yeah,
devaluing themselves.
they're devaluing themselves. I'm not
Right.
worthy.
So somebody that grew up poor, we've always been poor, we're going to stay poor. I'm not worthy of being middle class or wealthy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Could that kind of be the process that they may be following? And so instead of saying, okay, well, wait, that's not true, and I don't have to be ashamed, for one, as a child, you really have no control over that
Right.
anyway. You don't have to be
Right.
shameful from where you started. You can then decide what you want to do. So you would really kind of have to dig through like what's driving that. And I think the idea here, right, is that layer is a little bit deeper than most people are going or be willing to go, or have even been told they need to go, because they're valuing themselves based on something they feel ashamed of, and maybe even subconsciously doing so.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And that's the hard part. So if you do struggle with this, I mean, neither you nor I are a therapist. I mean, if there are those deep emotional traumas or issues, please seek help. But in terms, just know that it also comes out in your personal relationships and in your money relationship. And that's where I just wanted to kind of highlight that and shine a spotlight on it, because the key aspect of shame, according to Brene Brown, is that it grows in secrecy, silence, and judgment. And when you keep your shame hidden, it becomes more powerful. So the digging deep and discovering, oh yeah, I do feel shame about that. And you can adopt shame from your parents or caregivers. So just know that. And sometimes it belongs to you. Sometimes you did do something that you decided to feel shame about, but other times it's from those adults in your childhood. So kind of piecing that together and analyzing it and coming to a realization that yes, that was then, but this is now. And now I have control. I have agency. I can exercise my ability to change. I can see myself as a worthy person. I can see myself as a person who's learning about investments.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to happen all at once. We're all evolving and becoming. You're not stuck in one identity. And that's what I hope people hear.
Well, and I think, and I'm going to push the envelope a little bit here, because I think if our listeners are listening to this, they're thinking this does not mean wealthy people or upper middle class people. And I would love to suggest to our audience that the
Yeah.
reality of it is that there are just as many as what we would think other people that we think or don't have it that do have it as well, right? There's shame from them, for whatever reason, right? So they could be looking like they're living a wealthy life, but they're still probably not doing what they should be doing because they have some kind of underlying shame that they need to address as well.
It comes out in so many different ways. And it's not, it's it's because we're human. It's not
Right.
because we're rich or poor. So just know that. This is
Yeah. And I
part
think that's
of,
important, right? Because I think people will think
yeah.
they're just talking to me or they're not talking about me. And the reality of it is that each and every one of us should have this conversation. It's applicable to all of us.
Right, right, right. So, as part of the human experience, shame does get experienced. That I just want everybody to know that. So, what do you do? Let's shift to the second half of the conversation. Say you've sat with yourself and you've seen, or perhaps understand, yeah, I do feel shame, and you know where it is in your body. When I feel shame, I get hot just from my stomach up to my throat. I just get this feeling, this rush of, oh, I really messed up. And women in particular, I wanted to make this point, women in particular turn that inward to our own self-esteem, to our own value. And they've done experiments on this. Men tend to point to external factors, women take it in. And
Mhm.
so if you're a woman listening to this, hopefully you've seen yourself do that, because again, awareness is always the first step. And then as you recognize that, oh, I just felt shame, take a step back from whatever the situation is so you can understand a little bit better about what just happened. Because our brains associate in a second, in a heartbeat, with whatever emotional pattern you already have been living. So your brain is geared to look for triggers, look for threats. It's the old saber-toothed tiger. Is there something around that next rock or that next tree? And when your mind sees that, what it believes a threat, it will immediately go to one of those inherited or embodied responses, which could include shame. So the key is to break up that, oh, I see that, I'm going to do this. to break up that pattern. And the way you do that is step away from whatever the situation is, do some deep breathing, calm yourself because your nervous system has just gotten activated. I mean, we're very, very predictable in some ways, but complicated in others. So you have to kind of know where to break that pattern and insert this awareness. I'll call it awareness. And then as you get calmer, try to figure out, well, what was it about that situation or that message or that bill or whatever that triggered this reaction? And that's where you'll probably find shame. And then you don't necessarily have to know where the shame came from. If it came from a certain incident in your childhood or whatever, or you may know, it doesn't really matter. Recognize the shame and then bring it out in the open. Bring it out because shame cannot live in the light of day. And some of the ways, and we're now shifting the conversation to what can you do? Some of the ways to do that, if you have a trusted friend, if you have an advisor that you feel comfortable with, someone you can talk to about this process that you just went through, that you experience shame. And hopefully they're the type of person who will accept it. They're not going to fix you. They're not going to judge you. They're just going to hear it. And as you talk about this feeling of unworthiness or not being loved or not belonging or not being good enough, as you talk about it, it loses its power. And as you recognize, oh, that happened again, and you go through it again, and it's an unlearning of what you have learned. So that's one process. What do you think about that? And it's hard to explain, but you can take people through it when it happens. And the hardest thing for me has been to remember to do that. Because, like I said, your mind sees a threat and it will instantly go to your emotional pattern that you've created to survive that threat. And so it's the breaking, it's the disengaging from the threat and the pattern that we're working on and becoming aware of.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting, and I love that concept because I think one of the things we don't do enough of is stop and ask ourselves why.
Mhm.
Right. And whatever it is, the circumstance. But in this case, we're talking about money, right? We're talking about how you feel and how you are valuing yourself and the shameful nature that you might be carrying that you're not worthy because of money.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'll use an example when I'm sitting with clients because I think this is real practical in the way people can might identify this when it comes to money specifically, is that when I'm talking to people oftentimes, and I think literally probably 3 out of 5, if not 4 out of 5, now that we're kind of talking through this, I have to have the conversation with them first about how they feel about money. And a lot of times, what it is that they're feeling like they're not worthy of figuring this out because they haven't done it already, or they should have been doing it sooner, or they should have been. And so they've equated a value of
Mhm.
themselves based on what they have or have not done already around their money. And I have to walk them through that, okay, even if that was how you were feeling before, you don't have to stay in that feeling now. And the fact that you've recognized this, you're valuable enough to do this because you're doing it, you're having a conversation with me, right? We're sitting down, we're talking about your financial strategy, but oftentimes I can't even get to like the actual tactical things in a strategy before we have to have the conversation around how they sit with money and how they see themselves and the value they see themselves when we're talking about all these things. I mean, it shows up a lot, Kathryn, in ways like they'll say things like, well, I know other people have done this. And I'm like, but you're not other people, right? So that outside noise and that comparison or what they're seeing on the internet or in social media, and so they're feeling like, and now that we're having this conversation, what they're feeling of is they're devaluing themselves as it
Mhm.
relates to their money situation because they're ashamed of where they are in that situation.
Right. Right. So it may take more than one time.
Yeah,
You're
sometimes it does.
talking, yeah, you're talking about deep-seated beliefs,
Hmm.
and they may not be ready to make that change. You can't make that for them. So that's the whole point. What I would suggest, if you have someone who's negative about money and I should have done it, shoulda, woulda, coulda, that doesn't promote growth.
Hmm.
And there's no magic pill that you can give them that makes them see, oh, wait a minute, that's a bunch of crap. I believe I can do this other. So it's patience and understanding, and hopefully they hear and they allow a little snippet of what you're saying to come in, and they start seeing it for themselves. You
And
can't.
you know where I have to get them, Catherine, is I have to get them to understand that they deserve it.
Yeah.
Like they can't get to I have to get them there first. Let me say that. I shouldn't say they can't get there, but we have to go through that process. And now that we're having this conversation about the shame that kind of probably is underlying all of that, like
Mhm.
they don't have that value for themselves yet.
Right. One of the exercises that our listeners or viewers could do, and also your clients, is when they recognize shame. Let's just talk about that one segment, which I think influences a lot. When they recognize shame, either in the past or in a present situation, again, step back, go through that process I explained. But when they have a moment and they're quiet and no one's going to disturb them, here's what they can do to help flesh it out, to help bring shame out to the light so they can see it. Sit down and you're going to write 2 letters. All right. And no one's going to see these letters. This is just for you, but it's a way to process this emotion and to see what it's trying to tell you. Because any emotion we have, whether positive or negative, there's always a lesson in it. Now, we always want to focus on the positive, joy, happy, fun, blah, 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 because it's more fun. The
Mhm.
negative, dark emotions aren't much fun, but they also hold so much value. They're trying to tell you something. So here's what you do: sit down and write a letter to shame. Dear shame, this is Kathryn. I've always wanted to tell you that. And just tell shame what you think about it. Tell shame what it is that gets you so upset. Just let it come out. It's a free flowing thing. And then set that aside. Don't show it to anybody. This isn't for anybody but you. Don't show it to anyone. But then step aside, kind of get that out, get that negative stuff out. The point is to basically vomit on the paper, get it all out. And then when you're calm, come back and have shame write a letter to you. So it would be, Dear Kathryn, this is shame. I've always wanted to tell you that, and see what happens. You will be surprised what comes out. Now, I have my clients do this with money, but I don't know why we couldn't do it with shame. And shame will tell you what it's trying to tell you that maybe you haven't heard before. It's an amazing exercise. And then
That
that
sounds
way,
interesting.
once they see it, once they say that shame has been trying to tell them, I don't know, I can't think of something right now, but there's something there. There's some reason why you feel that emotion. Honor the emotion by listening to it. And
Mhm.
that's the way you work through it, because you will find the lesson that shame is trying to teach you, maybe in a negative way. But then once you see that, it's like, oh, I get it now. I can
Mhm.
do this instead. And then you can take action. But you have to deal with that underlying emotion first. And deal is not a good word. You have to confront and accept that underlying emotion before you can release it and surrender it and do something different.
Yeah, I always say it like this. I have to experience the emotions because we both know I'm not the emotional one of the two of us. And all
No.
of these exercises are so great. But there's reasons for why I have never been very emotional. And experiencing emotions allows me to figure what those are, where they come from, or why don't I deal with emotions?
Right.
Where did that come from? All of these things.
Yeah.
And then I would imagine the conversation around shame would be part of it is like you're carrying shame that's not your responsibility. You're carrying a shame that you did not create. You're carrying a shame that's not validated. I mean, I could just hear, and I can imagine writing these letters because you and I are in our two personalities. My letter's gonna be like, "Yo, shame, let me tell you something," right? That's gonna be my letter, like first issue and second issue, and it's gonna be all of the emotion in that regard, right? And then other people's gonna
Right.
be like, "Well, dear shame, da 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 da,"
Yeah, no.
but it's not right or wrong, right? It's how we
Right.
individually experience it
Right.
and then having shame say back to us because I think writing how you experience it then gives you also time to write the back. Well, wait, but that's not.
Right.
But Kimberly, that's not what it is. That's not what. And I think that exercise gives you a sense of not only control around what you're dealing with, but an opportunity to grow beyond it. Because
Exactly. It,
something
it,
you said, I think, is so powerful. is that everything in our lives are meant to teach us something, even
Mhm.
the bad things.
Mhm.
And so these negative emotions that we carry or feel, if we can address them and experience them, then we can figure out how do we grow past them. But if you just
Yes,
let them sit, that will never
exactly.
happen.
They fester. And that's what Brene Brown discovered in her research. So I have to read this quote because it just sums this conversation up so beautifully. Shame hates having words wrapped around it. Think about that. Shame does not want to be seen. Shame wants to, be under the undercurrent, kind of directing your actions, but it doesn't want to come up to the light. So when you write this letter to and from shame, you're bringing it to the light and you're wrapping words around it. If we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. Well, why not share it with yourself? It's you, yourself, and I. And that's the point of these letters. Or you can do this with another person, but you run the risk of them triggering their own shame. Why not do this for yourself first, gain a better understanding, a deeper understanding, and then if you have that trusted friend or mentor, great. So that's what I would offer. So
That
let's get healthy in our relationship with money. That's my goal, and especially for women, because I believe when women feel good about their money and they're managing their finances and they're growing and learning and helping others, because women naturally tend to help others, it elevates everyone and it helps heal the world. So women,
Mhm.
let's get to it.
I'm good with that. Let's make 2025 the goal for everybody. It's like we're going to have healthy relations with money. That's the other healthy component of our
Yes.
health goals that we set for the year, right? So that would be
Yeah,
excellent.
and remember that wealth is not just money or finances. Wealth is well-being in all areas of your life, one of which is finances.
Mhm. I love that. And I love this is why we started the wealth table anyway, right? Is to have
Yeah.
these conversations that nobody's ever having or telling people how these things show up and then how do you get past them? What do you need to do? What kind of tools do you need? So and I think one of the things that just hit me while we're wrapping up, Kathryn, is that
Mm.
I always say that wealth is not a dollar figure and money is just a tool. And that's the practical, tactical side of it, the conversation, right? But you
Mhm.
always speak about wealth as well-being, and that is the way we experience money and how we feel about money and everything. And I think the key is that you need both.
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely have
think
to have both.
we need both. And I think that's one of the things that I've grown to appreciate about working with you. It's like we need both. And it's made me a better person when I am planning and consulting my clients because I recognize those things now because those are the things that you focus on and teach as well.
Right, thank you. So to me, well-being comes before the practical, tactical. You
I
have to
mean, I
feel
will say I could see it me being a little bit more helpful. Yes. So,
So
I mean,
anyway, I hope everyone found benefit in this conversation. If you want to learn more, please reach out to us on whatever platform you're seeing this episode on. And please follow the Wealth Table and share it with your friends. We appreciate your support and your help. And of course, would love to hear from you.
yes, because
So
everybody has a seat at the wealth table.
everybody has a seat. So let's all take our seats and get healthy with money.
Awesome.
All
All right.
right.
Well, we'll talk to everybody next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.